Hey everybody, did you know that your body makes most of its own cholesterol, and cholesterol numbers aren't even really that important in terms of predicting your risk for heart disease or stroke? In this webinar, I'm going to shatter some of the common myths that people have about cholesterol numbers and how plaques are actually made and which numbers you should really be paying attention to. And way at the very end in this webinar, I do have a Q&A. You might have some of the same questions, so stay tuned till the end for that. With that, let's roll. Hey everyone, welcome. This is Dr. Bhavesh Patel, and I'm here for another webinar. And today's topic is cholesterol. Boy, what a big topic. We're actually going to break this up into a number of different webinars just because there's so much to cover on this topic. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. Uh, Everyone talks about it. It's one of the first things that people talk about with their doctors. I know when I talk to patients, they're always, telling me, "Oh yeah, my cholesterol is good," and they feel like that's automatically a marker of good health, and it always isn't. Um, and it's just a combination. There's just outdated thinking around cholesterol and what it means to your health. Why are we even measuring the cholesterol? Does it really impact your cardiovascular disease? If you have good cholesterol, does that really mean you're healthy? If your cholesterol is high, does it mean you're unhealthy? And do you have to take medications? Um, if the cholesterol doesn't look right, are you supposed to change your diet and avoid high cholesterol foods? Are you supposed to avoid high fat foods? And then you hear about all these diets that are high fat and low carb, and then people say their cholesterols are better. So it just gets really, really confusing. And then you've heard about good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. And how do you get the good cholesterol better and how do you get the bad cholesterol lower? So I just want to break down a lot of the cholesterol concepts out there and have you start thinking about what cholesterol really is, why it's really important for the body. It turns out you need cholesterol in your body because it's the basic building block of all the hormones in the body. So, for example, think about like a chassis of a car. And if you were to put a different shell on the car, it would turn into a different looking car. But the fundamental basic building block of that car is still that frame, that chassis. So, all the hormones in the body, your thyroid hormone, cortisol, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, even vitamin D, which it's a vitamin, but it's really a hormone. The basic building block is cholesterol. And they found that when people have too low of a cholesterol number over a number of years, the actual all cause mortality is higher. People are more likely to die from too low of a cholesterol from things like dementia, cancer, and infection related deaths, all of which are slow ways to die. And then it hasn't really been completely established that cholesterol causes the cardiovascular disease the way we thought it did. The research is based on stuff from 40 or 50 years ago. There's better studies out that show a different relationship. And so, again, it gets confusing around all of that. Um, but my thing I want to impress upon you is uh, what we can do to just understand it better to start. Though in different webinars, we'll go through what we can do about it. Um, let me address cardiovascular risk. Obviously, that cardiovascular risk is the big reason that we think about cholesterol. It is a big deal. It's one of the top three killers. Heart disease is one. I guess about 65 million people or so have cardiovascular disease. So that's why people think about it so much. And then the first thing they think about is cholesterol. Um, First thing I want to impress upon everyone is that how do we get cholesterol? Well, 75% of the cholesterol is made in the body. I mean, it's essential. Your body, again, like I said, needs it for the production of hormones, it needs it for the health of the cell wall, your nerves need it, your brain function is dependent on having good cholesterol in the body. So if 75% of it's made in the body and 25% comes from the diet, then how important is that dietary piece? Well, it also turns out that if you eat more cholesterol, your body makes a little less cholesterol. And if you eat less cholesterol, the body makes a little bit more cholesterol. So the body kind of knows how much it really needs in terms of cholesterol. Now, of course, there are people who have too high of a cholesterol and it causes some problems with cardiovascular disease, uh, but it's not the cholesterol number itself. This is why half of the people that show up to the emergency room or the hospital with a heart attack or a stroke have normal cholesterol. So if half the people have normal cholesterol, that means only half the people have high cholesterol. And there's people out there with high cholesterol who never have a heart attack or a stroke. So if we're looking at cholesterol numbers and we're modifying our diet to reduce fats and reduce cholesterol, and you're still having a heart attack or stroke, what's really going on here? Well, it comes to carbohydrate levels, which is one of the impacts that cause the heart disease. Um, when it so if we're thinking about we talk about carbs in the sugar videos, and I'm going to explain why that's a difference. And it comes down to the carbohydrates causing an increase in your triglyceride levels. So the distinction I want to make here is lipoproteins versus cholesterol. Okay, now we already said cholesterol is not the bad actor. If it's not the bad actor, what is the bad actor? Well, cholesterol has to get transported around the body for it to be effective. It's a fat soluble particle, and your blood or your blood is water. So the cholesterol doesn't really dissolve that well into the water. So for it to be carried around the body, it has to be attached to these things called lipoproteins. And this is where you get the concept of HDLs and LDLs, right? HDLs are your high density lipoproteins. And the LDLs are your low density lipoproteins. And typically, the HDLs are what we consider the good cholesterol, and the LDLs are what we consider the bad cholesterol. Well, it turns out not all the LDLs are bad. There's actually a type A that are large and fluffy, and they're actually the good kind of LDL. And there's a type B that's the bad cholesterol, the bad type of LDLs. And these are smaller and denser. They're shaped like a little bit like a BB. They're going to lodge into blood vessels a lot more easily than the type A, which are large and fluffy, and they sort of bounce off. Um, Out of the good cholesterols, generally, the higher the HDL levels are, the better. Uh, Now, there's some thought that maybe too high of an HDL means that a lot of them are not functioning and they may not be as effective or they may not be as good as they're meant to be. So let me make the distinction a little bit more clearly, though, of why the lipoproteins matter more than the cholesterol. If we're thinking about cholesterol as a molecule that has to be carried around from one place to the other, what really matters is what do those particles look like when they carry them around. We talked about the LDLs, and we talked about the type A, which are large, and the type B, which are small. And what that means is, think about if you had to transport, 100 bikes from point A to point B, and you have to get it over, let's just say from Chicago, where I'm at, and you have to get it to St. Louis, which is where my admin Angela is from. Now, if you had those 100 bikes, you could probably get all 100 bikes into one semi trailer, and that's going to get all those bikes over there. You might have to take all 100 bikes, maybe, let's say, in 10 pickup trucks. Oh, let me erase this. So we still have the 100 bikes, but we're going to put them now into 10 pickup trucks. All right. Or let's say we have the 100 bikes and we put them into 50 cars that can carry 2 bikes each with the little carrier racks. All right. Now, if you're thinking about the highway going down the road, you want one big semi, 10 pickup trucks, or do you want 50 cars? Now, I made this highway sort of as a cross section of what a blood vessel might look like. So imagine this is the blood vessel, and you have a blood vessel wall here. Well, this semi truck here is going to pretty easily go through the vessel without having too many issues. These pickup trucks over here, they're a little bit more likely to bang into the side of the blood vessel wall. And when it gets in there, it's going to start the formation of plaque, right? And here's the 50 cars that can carry 2 bikes apiece. Just because there's more of them, they're going to get into the blood vessel walls, and you're going to have a higher plaque formation here. And once you have that plaque formation, that's where that's where we thought cholesterol causes plaques, but it's really these particles that start the formation. Otherwise, you could have these 100 cholesterols going from point A to point B safely if it's in the right vessel, if it's in the particles that are large and fluffy. Versus if they're in the same 100 particles over here or the 100 particles over here. So now that we know that it's really the particles that are carrying the cholesterol that are the big issue, what can we do about that? What causes the particle size to change? I mean, like, some of it's just going to be the genetics in the body. Some of it's going to be your thyroid. If you're under thyroid, your LDL particles don't work as well. And then the diet does have a bit of an impact. And for me, the big part with the diet, obviously we can check the genetics, we can check the thyroid. But with the diet, the easiest number on a lipid profile that we typically get at the doctor's office, there is a number called the triglyceride number. All right. Tri means 3, and glycerides basically sugars. So this is 3 fats connected to 3 sugars, and that's kind of what the triglycerides are. But the general story is this: when your triglycerides go up, the number of particles goes up. Okay. And so if we're thinking about diet and we're thinking about ways to reduce the cholesterol, and specifically when I say that, I don't mean cholesterol, I mean the LDL particle count is what you're really trying to reduce here. It makes sense that reducing the triglycerides is going to reduce the particles. Now, that's not always the case, but that's generally the case. Unfortunately, we're still at a point in cardiovascular disease and assessment that even if you have all the right numbers, and even if your LDL particles are pretty good, it still doesn't always necessarily predict heart disease, plaque formation, and stroke. I'm going to save the conversation about additional testing for another webinar. Just know there's more to the story around this. Now, having said that, yeah, why not reduce the particles as much as you can? So reducing the triglycerides is still a valuable thing to do. We know that that's going to be healthier. It may not be the answer completely, but decreasing carbs is important. Again, this is why all those low carb diets are working for people in terms of losing weight and having better cholesterol numbers, which was counterintuitive. I mean, we all remember back in the 80s when we thought cholesterol was all related to the diet. And so everyone was eating these low-fat diets that were high in carbohydrates. So you had your, no cholesterol eggs, you had your egg whites, you had the rice cakes. And we're just eating a lot of calories without a lot of nutrition. And that ended up with us having a bigger problem in our society with diabetes and metabolic syndrome and being overweight. And we haven't really moved the needle much on cardiovascular disease. So carbs is a big one, and increasing omega-3 fatty acids. These are the healthy fats that you get from salmon, tuna, avocados. Fish oil supplements are great here. So I just want to have you get this concept down. The car analogy is great, but as you're sort of looking around, just another way to just sort of really get this into a way of thinking about cholesterol and reminding yourself that it's the vessel that carries it. Think about if something like Starbucks coffee. If you had to bring 20 coffees back to the office, you could go get 20 small coffees, or you could put that same amount of coffee into a big vessel. That's going to be a lot easier to carry into the office and serve your 20 or your 19 other colleagues coffee for that morning. And then 10 large coffees is better than 20 small coffees, right? I know none of you drink soda, but soda comes in all kinds of different containers. You've got your 6-ounce cans, your 12-ounce cans, your 16-ounce, 20-ounce, and your 2 liters. You can carry that same amount of soda under one hand with a 2-liter versus 14 little cans. Again, the idea being, what's the safest way to transport that item from one place to the other? The larger the vessel, the easier and the safer it is to carry that over. So with that, I just want to stop there for this webinar. In a later webinar, I'm going to go over how to interpret the labs. But having said that, let's take some questions if there are any. Angela, if you have any questions lined up in the chat, if anybody just wants to have a question, go ahead and type it in, and Angela can read them out to me.
Dr. Patel, we do have a question. As for the omegas, is there anything besides fish or fish oil that people can take or eat that will help them?
Yeah, so there are vegetarian sources, like certain types of algae do have it. There's krill oil, which is some people consider non-fish oil, but that still kind of comes from animal. I would probably Google that up. Let's see, why don't we do that now? I'll put this back over here, and let's see, why don't we go to Google and see non-animal omega-3 source. So let's see, there's some algae oil, kind of as I mentioned before, vegan omega-3 algae. Here's a website that's got fish sources. It's also got the vegetarian, so seaweed and algae. Hopefully you like that. Chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds, walnut, edamame. I still think, look, calorie for calorie, and fish oil is going to be the best way to get it. All of these other ones, beans are going to have fiber and some other issues that you might have an issue with. Walnuts are great, but again, that's going to be pretty heavy duty in terms of the calories that you're going to take in. But this is a pretty nice website that's got some information on that. Great question, and I love being able to just show how I look things up too, and you guys can do this. This whole webinar series is about patient empowerment and keeping you in charge of your health. All right, any other questions?
Dr. Patel, we did have a question. If you are wanting to check just your cholesterol levels and you were ordering the test for yourself, what type of test would you be ordering?
Yeah. So look, the standard lipid profile that you get from your doctor's office is measuring cholesterol, and when it's measuring the cholesterol, that is not measuring particle counts. That's just going to measure total cholesterol, your HDL. When they say HDL, they're not measuring the HDL lipoproteins, they're measuring the cholesterol carried by lipoproteins. And so that's that test. The cholesterol is generally estimated through a calculation based on triglyceride levels. And so that's going to be when they say your LDL numbers, your good your bad cholesterol, how much is it? They're really saying here's the estimate of how much cholesterol is carried by LDL particles. We don't know if they're type A or type B, or if they're small or big, but this is the estimate of cholesterol carried by. Again, this is why I like the triglyceride number the best, because that's going to give me the most insight into whether or not you have small LDL particles or large LDL particles. There are additional tests available for that. You can actually test the particles themselves. That's called lipoprotein analysis. Sometimes they're called advanced cardiovascular risk markers. But that's what we call additional residual risk. When you have a normal cholesterol profile, but your particle counts are still really high, and you can get that test. That's a test that's your doctor can order, but you'd be asking for lipoprotein analysis or advanced cardiovascular risk markers or something like that. There's some different marketing terms around it, but you're looking for LDL particle counts and HDL particle counts. I think we can take another question if we have one.
Dr. Patel, we do have a question regarding carbs. You mentioned that there were good carbs. Are there any particular ones that you would recommend?
Yeah, I guess this goes back into just sort of general theory on carbs. Anytime you have carbohydrates in the body, there's going to be simple ones that are, the sort of the highly processed, refined carbohydrates, which raise your blood sugar and your insulin and your sugar levels really quickly. Or you're going to have sort of the complex carbohydrates that are harder to break down. Or as we talked about in a different video, you can reduce the impact of absorption if you pair a carbohydrate with a healthy protein or a healthy fat. All of that is to try to keep that triglyceride level down when we're thinking about a cardiovascular purpose. So keeping the keeping that carbohydrate level down is going to help reduce the triglyceride level. And when that triglyceride level comes down, we hope that the LDL particle level comes down. And if the LDL particle level comes down, we hope that we're having less plaque formation in the body. Again, that's the thesis of how it should all work. But there are variations in people, whether it's via genetics or hormone imbalances, other things. So there's and we'll cover it in another video, but there's, imaging of the heart and the vessels is ultimately where I think we need to be going. So you can really see what your body's doing with with all these cholesterol numbers and triglyceride numbers. So, okay, guys, I think that's what we have enough time for today. Hopefully this was a helpful video for you, just for the fundamentals. In another webinar, we'll talk about analyzing a lipid profile and looking at advanced particle analysis. And then we'll probably do a webinar around some of the other testing, some of the imaging I was talking about, and some of the genetics that you can think about. Again, I think understanding cholesterol is important. It's also important to understand where it's where it's useful to be worried about it and where it's not useful to be worried about it. And remember that cholesterol is needed by your body. Cholesterol is needed for the health of your neurons, of all the hormones production in your body, the health of the cells, and their ability to function is all dependent on good, healthy cholesterol levels. That's why your body makes it. It needs it. All right, guys. Have a great day.